All right, what we're going to do today is we're going to look at building this design right here. And mostly what we'll be looking at are shape layers and creating these circles, these dashed circles, using shape layers. The background, animating it in, is a solid and then a mask. And that'll be the first thing we'll look at, animating that mask. So let's get into this. We need to start a composition, and the composition that I have started is a 1280 by 720, 24 frames, and this is 10 seconds long. So if you want to start a composition, you can do that and follow along. The first thing that we're going to need to do is create a solid layer in the background, for the background. And we can do that by going up to Layer, New, and Solid. We can choose our color here. And I'm going to try to get that color back that I had. Just whatever color you want to choose as your background, you can do so. I'm going to dial this in somewhere a little bit brighter, about there. So choose your background color, hit OK on that, and then let's hit OK. Make sure that this is comp size. If you're not comp size right there, 1280 by 720, you can always hit make comp size, and then hit OK. All right, so we have part of our background. The first thing that we're going to, after that, what we need to add will be an effect. We're going to add the gradient ramp to this background to create that gradient look that we have in there, the brightness there in the center. We're going to use a gradient ramp to create that. So let's go up to Effect and Generate Gradient Ramp. And we're going to need to do a little work here. First thing, let's swap these colors. Oops, wrong place. Let's swap these colors. And then also change this from a linear ramp. You can see this is a linear ramp to a radial ramp. And that gets us a lot closer. And what we want to do is we want to bring this center down, the bright spot here down to the center. And we can do that by going up to the start of ramp. You'll see our start of ramp color right there. And let's scrub this Y position down to the center. And that should be 360 once we get down there. So you can either scrub down there or dial that in. So we should be at 640 by 360. And then the end of ramp, which is the black part, we can dial that out by grabbing right here at the 720 and dragging that on out a bit. All right. So we have our gradient ramp, but our color for our background has gone away. So let's bring up the blend with original a little bit. You can dial that in maybe about 50%. So we're blending the ramp, the effect, the gradient ramp with the background color. All right, so we have our background now. Next thing we want to do is we want to animate this in, and we'll take a look here at what we're doing. It comes in as a circle, and we will create that effect by using a mask. So jump back over here, and this tool, again, the ellipse tool, or if it's selected, the rectangle tool, our shape tool up here, works two different ways. And the way we want it to work right now is we want it to create a mask. And to create a mask on a layer, we need to make sure that that layer is selected. So go up here to your rectangle tool. Let's select the ellipse tool. And bring your crosshairs from the ellipse tool to the center. You should be able to almost pretty much line those up. And click and start dragging. And then after you start dragging, hold down your Command, Option, and Shift key. And that's going to lock that to the center and then also constrain the proportions. And then just build you a mask. Let's see, let's to try to get this for everybody close to the same size. Let's drag it so that our top and bottom's pretty much hitting top and bottom. And then you can let go and let go of your mouse first, and then let go of your key shortcuts. And we have a mask now, a circular mask right there, pretty much in the center, and that's the way we want it. Now that we've drawn this mask, and you can see how a mask works, it masks out or masks in, however you want to look at it, part of the background and cuts out the rest of it. So in here, of course, we have our background layer, and then out here we have nothing. It's just our alpha channel that we've created with a mask, and we'll take a look at that so you can see that there's nothing back there. We're going to animate this mask so that we get that effect of the background wiping in. To do that, we're going to come down here to the timeline, and we're going to roll open. You'll see now that we've applied a mask, and there's our mask, mask 1. And we have 4 properties here in this mask that we can animate. The first is the mask path, and that is the shape. And we're not going to worry about these numbers right now, but that is indicating where our 4 points are for the mask shape, so we could animate those individually if we wanted to. The mask feather, which will feather this edge here, and we can draw that up, and you can see how it's starting to feather this edge. And then also the opacity, which is the inside of the mask, the opacity of what is left inside of that mask. And then we also have the mask expansion, which can expand this mask or retract the mask, just depending on what direction we go there. I'm going to go ahead and set this back to where it was, and so that it is a perfectly round circle there. So we're going to animate this using the mask expansion. This is going to be a little bit easier way. We could animate it using mask path, but for today we're going to use the mask expansion. So if you're not, come to the beginning of your timeline here. Make sure your timeline indicator is right there. And let's click on the stopwatch to set that first keyframe. And then what we can do is drag down the mask expansion, bring it on down, and it will, mine's down to about -358. It's really gonna depend on the size of your mask that you've drawn there. So mine's about at -360, which makes sense. And then so that's the first keyframe, and let's come in about a second into the timeline and then bring that up, and we're going to go well above 0 on this, and let's see, yeah, it'll go above about 400 in there. And so now we have animated this mask, and we've used the mask expansion. So any point that you hit below 0, you're going in, you're causing this mask to shrink, and then once you get above 0, you're causing the mask to expand. So that is an easy way to just animate this mask on and off on top of this background. So we've got that wiping in now. Next thing we want to do is we want to start working with our shapes. So let's go up here, and as I told you earlier, this tool, this set of tools right here, the shape tool, works as 2 different types of tools. The first time we used it, we drew a mask. Now when we use it, we're going to draw a shape. And to make sure that we draw a shape, we make sure that there's nothing selected down here in the timeline. So first time we drew a mask, we had our layer, our solid layer selected. This time we have nothing selected in the timeline. So now when we come up here, we can click on our ellipse, and we can just start drawing in here, and hold down the shift key and draw your circle. And the holding down the shift key is going to constrain the proportions so that you draw a perfect circle. Now you'll notice that I am not centered here, and we're going to fix that. That's easily fixable. So let's go over here and get the selection tool so that we're no longer drawing any other shapes. Now you'll notice down here in the timeline that we have shape layer 1, and there's a point here that I want to make about shape layers. We're going to look at, once we draw the shape layer, we're going to have the contents here, and in the contents at this point we just have ellipse 1. Later on throughout this, we're going to add a couple of more ellipses to this, and what you're able to do on a shape layer is you're able to add multiple shapes to one layer. The problem with this is that you may become confused if you're not paying attention, number one, to which shape you're animating. So the shapes will hopefully be numbered. And then also, the transform properties here. These transform properties are going to animate the layer. There is another set of transform properties right here, and they say ellipse 1. They're going to animate this first ellipse. So if I add a second ellipse, I'm going to have transform properties for ellipse 2, and so on. For right now, make sure we do not open up these transform properties, because that is not where we want to be working. That will animate the layer and everything on the layer. Right now we just want to transform or animate ellipse 1. Alright, so we open up these transform properties, and you'll notice they're very similar to our layer transform properties, but they have a couple of more properties that we can animate. We have anchor point, position, scale. The new one is skew and skew axis, and then we also have rotation and opacity. To center up this circle here, this ellipse, let's go to position and let's zero out this X and Y. Now our circle is centered in the composition. So all you have to do to center that up is zero out X and Y on the position for the transform properties of ellipse 1. It's not going to work if you open up these transform properties. Alright? So now let's set this ellipse 1 to look a little more like what we have going on here. You'll notice our dashes and our fact that we have no fill in here. This is just a stroke with dashes. All three of these are just strokes with dashes. There's no fill in these circles, and that's what we're going to work on now. So let's set this up. The first thing, easiest way to adjust these will be to use these properties up here. So when we have a shape layer selected, we're going to have a fill property, the fill color, a stroke property, and the stroke color. The first thing that we want to do is we want to eliminate this red fill. So we can do that by clicking on the word fill, and you'll notice we have 4 options here. One is to create the solid, which we have. The next one is to create a linear gradient. The next is to create a radial gradient. And then the first one is the one we want. We want to select no fill. So now that we've got that, we can hit OK there, and you'll notice now that we are striking out that fill, no color there. And for our stroke there is not white, it's black. So we don't need to click on the word stroke, but let's click on the stroke color here, which is hard to see. And let's set that to white. And we're okay on that. And I'm going to dial this up, I guess, to 12 pixels width. And that is the stroke width. You can see that we can dial that up or down, and you can see that we can make it wider or thinner. And get that back to about 12 pixels, and there we go. Alright, so that is a quick, easy way to adjust these properties, the fill and the stroke, for any shape layer that you have. You can also do that here in these 4 sets of properties. There you have your stroke color, your stroke width. All of that is coincides with what's up here. We have a few more properties here also that we can work with. And also for the fill, you can see that we have the color here, and if I was to select that, it would pop the fill back in. But for right now we have that off. We don't need that fill. Let's go back to the stroke, and let's add some dashes to this. And you'll notice that our dashes property is right here. And at this point we have nothing, but we do have the plus button that we can select. And that's what we want to click on. We want to click on the dash plus button. And now you can see that we've dashed this stroke. And let's increase the dash size. Each individual dash, they're at 10 pixels now, but if we drag that on up, you'll see that we can increase the dash size. And I think we'll go with about 36 on this. Let's try 36. I think that'll give us a nice even size and nice even space between them. Alright, so we have our first ellipse here. It's dashed, but at this point there's no motion to it. So what we need to do is we need to animate this ellipse, And again, we do not want the layer transform properties, but we want the transform properties for ellipse 1. So let's open those back up, and there's our rotation. And rotation is broken out into the number of full rotations. So 0x means that right now we're not rotating at all. We haven't rotated not a single time. And then also the degrees. There's 360 degrees in a full rotation. And so we can go 360 degrees there. And once we pass 360, we have one full rotation showing up there. So this is how these numbers work. And they give you this option. I'm going to go ahead and zero these out, so when we animate, they're ready to go. They give you these options so that if we know we want this thing to rotate 5 full times, we don't have to scrub this thing around 360 degrees 5 times. We can simply start off at 0, set that keyframe, go to the end, and then set 5, set that keyframe, and this ellipse will rotate 5 times in that duration. Now, for this animation, I only want this to animate or rotate once because we're only 10 seconds, and if we go any much faster than that, it almost starts to look like it's not rotating at all. So let's go back to the beginning of our composition, and let's set the first keyframe for that rotation. And make sure that everything is zeroed out, and then go to the end of the composition, and where it says 0x, click on that, type in 1, hit enter, and we've set our second keyframe for one full rotation. And now when we render this out and let it animate, you can see that we are rotating during the entire time of the composition, the 10 seconds. And this is also an easy way to create a loopable animation, because this will rotate one full time in that 10 seconds and it starts all over. Alright, so we've done that. The next thing we need to do is we need to animate this ellipse coming in. And the way we're going to do that is with the ellipse path 1 size. We can take a look and see how this looks. Right now we have the size that we wanted at, so we're going to kind of work backwards here on animating this one. This is going to be our ending position. Since we already know that, we're going to set the last keyframe first. So we need 2 keyframes to animate with, so we're going to set the second one or the last one first, and then we'll go back to the first one and set it, since we already know this is the size we want it to end at. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to jump into the timeline about 1.5 seconds. That's where I want it to end. And I'm going to set this keyframe right here on size. So that is our ending size right there. Now we're going to push back in the timeline to about 12 frames, which is 0.5 seconds. And let's set another keyframe, adding a keyframe right there. And then let's bring this size down to 0. And so now we have our beginning keyframe with our size of the ellipse at 0. That's why we can't see it. And then it animates up. I think that's going to be pretty interesting to see, to our second keyframe right there. And let's render this out and see how it looks. Yeah, I like that. All right, so let's let that run through one more time. And we'll go with that at this point. So at this point, what we have done is we have animated our background using a solid and then animating the mask that you see right there. Our second animation is the shape layer with this ellipse 1 on it. So this is what we've animated at this point. We have a rotation going here, and we also have it the sizing up as it comes in. So we've started our animation. So what we have now is our shape layer 1 with ellipse 1 on it. And what we're going to do is copy and paste this ellipse 1 so that we have another instance of it and we can make changes to it. So what we need to do is, first thing, let's drag this current timeline indicator back to the beginning. That's a very important step, because if we don't, then when we copy and paste, the ellipse 2 comes in at the wrong place. We need it at the beginning, and so we need to drag this back to the beginning. So let's click on ellipse 1. We're going to copy it, so Command C, and then let's go to the word contents, select it, and now paste it, Command V. Now we have our ellipse 1 and our ellipse 2, and to see that, we can drag forward. Now, of course, we don't see ellipse 2 because it is directly underneath ellipse 1. It's doing the exact same thing. It's the exact instance. So we're not seeing it right now. We can shut off the visibility, and there it is. There's ellipse 2. You can shut off the visibility of ellipse 2 just to see. Let's click those back on. And what we're going to do is make some adjustments to ellipse 2. So let's scroll that open. Let's go to stroke, and then let's size up that stroke, maybe around 55. And then we want to go down to our dashes now, and we're going to set this dash size to be much larger. Let's go up to about 90 on that. And so now I'm going to see, yeah, like that. I'm going to drag this back down to about 35%, and then our dash size to about 90%, or 90 pixels, sorry. So our stroke width is 35 pixels, and our dash width, our depth distance, is 90 pixels. And so now you can see that we have two separate ellipse in there. And the next thing we need to do is we're going to need to adjust the animation of this coming in so that we fit inside of ellipse 1. So we need to go to the ellipse path, open that up, go to size, and let's go to that second keyframe. J and K will get you between your keyframes. So J goes to the left and K will take you to the right. So the next keyframe, J, would be that first keyframe. Going back will take me, K will take me back to, that is an easier way to navigate between keyframes and make sure that you hit the keyframe. So we don't want it to scale up, or we don't want it to size up to 622 pixels. We want it to scale up smaller than that. So let's drag that down. So what we need to do is we need to size this down on the second keyframe so that when it comes in, it will stop right there at that keyframe, and that it is smaller in size than our outer ellipse. One of the things that you're going to notice is it's going to look like these dashes are disappearing, one's disappearing into the other, and we're going to kind of average that out as we size this down to get it. You'll notice what it's doing in just a moment. So you can see how they're disappearing inside of each other. And to give this so that it looks proportionate, I think we need to be about, kind of watch it. Yeah, that started coming back out. So go back, yeah, around 513 I think it's going to be. So I'm going to dial that in at 513 right there, and that way it appears that we're proportionate all the way around, the same distance between our gaps here, our dashes here. Alright, so what we have done now is we have changed the animation on this second ellipse by changing simply the second keyframe there. So we can go back to the beginning. Let's take a look at this, see how it animates in. Rather interesting there. What I think I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust where this animation occurs in the timeline, and that's pretty simple to do. Yeah, I think I'll adjust it by about half a second. So what I'm going to do, stop this, and I'm going to select both of these keyframes, and I want this animation to occur about half a second later. So it's starting at half a second into the time. And so to adjust it another half second, we'll go to 1 full second. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to click on, you can see I get my time indication right there. in my little dialog box that pops up, and I'm going to click and drag till I get to about 1 second there. And we can set our timeline indicator if we want to at 1 second. I'm a little off, so we'll drag that on back in, and we should be at about a second right there. So I selected both of the keyframes there, and I was able to move both of them. So I'm moving this animation in time so that it happens a little bit later in the animation. So let's go now to the beginning, take a look at it. Yeah, there we go. Now the other thing that I want to adjust is the rotation. This is rotating. Both of them right now are rotating at the same speed in the same direction, which is clockwise. What I want to do with the second one is adjust it or change it so that it will rotate counterclockwise. And that's a fairly simple operation to do also. Under Ellipse 2, what we need to do is go to the Transform Properties for Ellipse 2, open that up, and there's our rotation. There's our rotation right there. You can see our two rotation keyframes. And by selecting the word rotation, it selects both of the keyframes. And that's what I want to do. Then I can go to either of the two keyframes, right click, and go to Keyframe Assistant and Time Reverse Keyframes. So what that basically does is it flips these two keyframes. And now this rotation should be going in the opposite direction. So now you see that we have both of the ellipse animating in, and one is going clockwise and one is going counterclockwise, and that's what we want. Next thing we need to do is, I don't really want to copy and paste Ellipse 2 because we've made too many different changes to that. It'll be easier to copy and paste Ellipse 1 again, and we'll have less to adjust on it. So let's copy that again, select Ellipse 1, Command C, go to the word Contents, and what we need to do before we paste that is stop the animation, go to the very beginning with our timeline indicator, select that word Contents, and then Command V. Now we have Ellipse 1, 2, and 3. And at 1, we don't need to really look at it right now because we know that it's going to be the same. Or we don't need to look at 3 right now because we know it's the same as 1. So let's go ahead, scrub in so we can see them, and let's make some adjustments to Ellipse 3. And the first thing we need to adjust will be the ellipse size. And we need to park ourselves on that second keyframe so that we make the adjustment there, so that the final size will be the size that we want it to be when it animates in. And we're going to bring the size of that down a little bit. And I'm going to judge this probably, and again we need to watch my spots right there, around 434. Looks like that's going to work. And I know that I can tell already that my other two keyframes are right there for Ellipse 2. And so I'm going to select these two, click and drag right here, these two keyframes right here. And I'm going to drag them, well, where I have my timeline indicator is going to work because I'm at a 1.5 seconds right there. So that's where this animation is going to begin, and it'll end right there. And I'm going to drag back to see how this looks. Yeah. All right. Probably want to adjust the size there a little bit because I want a little more distance in between 2 and 3. So I'm going to stop the animation, use my J key to get back to that second keyframe, and I'm going to dial this back just a little bit more, and I need to watch over here where the two are intersecting. These two are going to intersect, and okay, so for this one it's going to be right around 413. So we'll see. I want to go a little bit further. I want a little more distance, see if we can work that out. Let's see. All right, so looks like that's going to be around 389. Okay, that looks better. I like that. I like that distance a little bit better. Drag back to the beginning, hit the space bar, see how this is animating. Alright, so we have animated these 3 ellipses here. So they're all coming in. We've got the background coming in, we've got the 3 ellipses coming in and doing their full rotations. We could change the speed of these by increasing the number of rotations, but for this, at this point, if you want to work with that, you can. Otherwise, I'm happy with the speed that they're rotating at. Alright, the last thing we want to do is we want to create this crosshair here and animate that in. I say that's the last thing, but we also have the letters in there to animate. So I'm going to go back, and the thing about the shape tool is we have 2 other shapes that we've not really explored. And you have the polygon tool and the star tool. What we want to work with for this next shape is the star tool. So let's select the star tool, come in here and make sure that your shape layer 1 is selected, because we're going to add this to shape layer 1, keep all of our shapes on there, and just click and drag. You can see I've kind of already got mine set up a little bit, and actually that's going to be a little too large, I can already tell, so I'm going to drag that down a little bit and just kind of get that size. We can adjust that in just a moment. Just draw that star in there, and we're going to take a look at the properties for this Polystar 1. You can see now that under our contents we have Polystar 1 that we've added. We have Polystar path, the stroke, the fill, and the transform properties. On your fill, make sure that you go up and select no fill under the word no fill or fill, and then none right there. Hit OK. And then our stroke is set at about 11 pixels white, just like our other properties, our other shapes are set. And we need to center that up. So to do that, let's go to Polystar 1 down here in the timeline, transform properties, Polystar 1, and we need to zero that out, our X and Y position, and there it is in the center. And you'll notice that we have 5 points, and our other one in the our example has 4 points. So what we need to do is go to our Polystar path, and you can see there we have the number of points that we can set. For this example, I'm going to set it at 4 so that we can work our text in here in just a moment. And the next thing that we need to look at is setting our rotation. And let's zero that rotation out. Just make it a little more organized. And we need to, just like we did with the other shapes, set a beginning rotation and an ending rotation. And for this, I'm going to just go 1 full rotation to make it pretty simple. So we start off at 0, set our keyframe there. Let's drag to the end and do 1 full rotation so that this is not spinning too fast. And we should have that now rotating. Alright, so you can see that we're part of the way there on that animation. The only thing that we need to do now is animate the size of the crosshair coming in and the, where we want it to come in the timeline. So let's go to our, what we're going to animate is our outer radius. And I think let's start this at about 2 seconds in. And my inner radius right now is set at 1.3. I'm going to zero that out. And then 126 is going to be our ending outer radius. So I'm going to go ahead and set my stopwatch to set my first keyframe. And I'm going to zero that out so that our crosshair is has no size to it. That's why we don't see it. And then I'm going to jump up to about 3 seconds in the timeline. And then we're going to punch that back in at 126. And now that animates in. So there's our first and our second keyframe. Set it at 0 on the first keyframe and move and then set it at 126 on the second keyframe, and let's see how that looks. Alright, I'm going to watch this one more time just to see for timing. May want to adjust this crosshair a little bit. And it comes in pretty good. Alright, we're going to work with that. So now we've got these 4 shapes animated. And we'll review this a little bit. We have one shape layer. And I'm going to demonstrate this just so you hopefully understand and hopefully haven't made this mistake during the tutorial. But we have one shape layer and we have 4 shapes on it, and each shape has its own transform properties. Each shape has its own transform properties. That's why we've been animating the individual shapes transform properties rather than the transform properties for the layer. Because if I go in here and I animate the transform properties for the layer, you can easily see this by adjusting the scale or the position. You can see that it animates all 4 of them. Now that can be helpful, especially if we want to, at the end of this, take out the entire set here. We can simply do that by animating the layers transform properties. So everything on this layer will be animated by adjusting these 5 transform properties here. And also opacity will work, the rotation, but they're already rotating, so we don't need that. And scale. So you can see how we want to stay away from these when we're animating the individual shapes. So that is the reason why we were not using that set of transform properties, but we were using the individual set of transform properties. Alright, for the last pieces of text, and really we can just use whatever text that you want to use in there. I'm just going to just use a random letter, probably just use R for some reason. I'm going to just click in the viewer and give me a nice R right there. And mine's been set up, so I'm going to change these properties here. I'm going to kill the stroke on this one. And I'll just stay with Helvetica for right now, just so we can get this finished. Now, what I do want to do for this text layer, you see that the text layer is here. Scroll this close, clean the workspace up a little bit. This text layer, I'm going to go to the transform properties for it, and I'm going to set this position for this. Now, the thing about this is my anchor point is right here on the bottom left of the letter, and that's where I want it. Now, if yours is not there, what you need to do is go to your paragraph settings for that text and select left align text. Okay, and that will set that anchor point right there at the bottom left corner of the letter. And then we want to set this anchor point, this position of this anchor point, to be center, which for this is going to be 640 by 360. That is half of 1280 by 720. So that is, and I typed that in wrong, 640 by 360. Looked like it was a little off. All right. And then I'm going to scroll through to just try to get my crosshairs to where they're about 90 degrees. Yep. That looks good right there. So just scrub through until you have your crosshairs straight up and down. And we're going to adjust the anchor point for this now to set this R more in position. We want that anchor point to stay center, so we're not adjusting position, we're going to adjust the anchor point. So I'm going to click on my X and scrub to the left just a little bit, and then I'm going to grab my Y and scrub to the right just a little bit, and position that just to where it's kind of centered right in there. And now that is in the correct position, and that's going to work for us. Now it is not rotating and it has not animated in, but we're going to take care of that. What we need to do is make sure that this rotation is the same rotation as our crosshairs. And of course, we've been using the same rotation throughout, so that just needs to be one full rotation in this entire 10 seconds. So again, simple way to do that is just click on the stopwatch, go to the end of the composition, and then click on the 0x and type in 1 for one full rotation. And now we have that, and we can see that that should match up to, once it comes in, our crosshair. So there we have our crosshair. And of course, we will animate the R coming in so that it's not out there in front of everything. So let's do that. And I think what we'll do on this is just set a simple opacity. And to do that, let's wait. Yeah, it's going to be about 3 seconds. About 3 seconds in, we can begin to animate the opacity of this R. I'm going to click on the stopwatch. I'm going to zero that out so that we do not see the R, and then jump forward about to 4 seconds and bring that opacity up to 100%. And now that R is going to come in after the crosshairs comes in. And there we have it. So we have our first R in there. Now, to set the other 4 in there, or if you, and an easy way to do this is just to duplicate this layer. And if you want to change the text, you can change the text after we've duplicated and set up the animation. But let's do that real quick. And we'll stop about 4 seconds in so that we see it. And Command D. So we have R and we have R2. And what we're going to need to do is to adjust the rotation on both keyframes for this rotation. So to do this, let's go back to the very beginning of the timeline. Of course, we're not going to see this, but this is pretty simple math. 360 divided by 4 is 90. And so all we're going to do is add 90 degrees to both of these keyframes. And just click on the 0.0 degrees and type in 90 and hit enter. So we've added that to the first keyframe. Now let's go to the last keyframe and add in 90 degrees again, so that now we have our 2 R's set at 2 different starting points as far as their rotation, but yet they're going to still do one full rotation. So the first one starting at 0 degrees, the next one starting at 90 degrees, and so the third one, if we duplicate it, all we have to do is add 180 degrees to it, and then the fourth one we would do 270 degrees. And I'll do that real quick just so you see what I'm talking about. I'm going to duplicate R2, Command D. So we have R3. I'm going to go to rotation, and I'm going to use the shortcut key to just bring up that rotation. I'm going to come back to the beginning here so that I set it at these keyframes. I'm adjusting these keyframes. Click on the 90 and type in 180, and then go to the ending keyframe and type in 180. And now I have my third R in there, and we can duplicate the third R. And this one will need to be 270 degrees. So select that, type in R for rotation, and come back to the first keyframe, type in 270. Go to the final keyframe, type in 270. And now all of our letters are in position and rotating at the same speed. And there we have our little animation.